What if you could predict economic growth faster and more accurately than the Federal Reserve using images from outer space? Welcome to the Great Ideas Podcast, where we help aspiring leaders build executive presence, inspire with influence, and get promoted. I'm your host, longtime CEO Barry Moline. Economic forecasting has always lagged behind reality, relying on outdated reports and anecdotal data. But what if real-time satellite-driven insights could replace guesswork with precision? In this episode, we explore how satellite imagery and AI are revolutionizing the way we understand macroeconomic trends. Today, we're talking with Jake Schneider of Analysts, who tells us how a groundbreaking algorithm transforms satellite data into GDP forecasts weeks ahead of government reports. You'll discover why satellite imagery outperforms traditional economic indicators in accuracy and speed. And you'll hear how businesses, investors, and policymakers can use these insights to make smarter, faster decisions in real time. Listen now to discover how satellite-powered forecasting is changing the economics game and what it means for your future. Let's get into it. Welcome, Jake.
Hey, Barry. Delighted to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Awesome. Well, let's get into this macroeconomic forecasting from outer space. What does that really mean?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked. You're not the first person. A lot of people, when they hear what I'm doing and my technology, which I'll get into further in the call, kind of wonder, is this for real? Is this actually a legitimate endeavor? The short answer is yes. The longer answer we'll get into as we discuss throughout this podcast. But in essence, for your listeners, they kind of get oriented to what we're talking about. My name's Jake. I am an economist. I have a master's in international economics from the Harvard Kennedy School. I have an MBA with distinction from Oxford Said Business School. And my first boss was Alan Greenspan. And so during my Greenspan days, had an inkling of an idea that you could use pictures from outer space to predict economic conditions. And when I was a grad student at those various venerable institutions, I worked on the algorithm. In addition to my economics classes, I took the remote sensing and data science and computer vision classes, and eventually built an algorithm that ingests satellite imagery and uses that imagery with my proprietary patent pending algorithm to extract information. And that information is the expansion of the built environment. And so it tracks the expansion of the physical footprint, and that's a good proxy for GDP. And now I've gone on a soliloquy, so I'm going to pause for a second and see if that resonates.
So I'm trying to fit this into what I'm familiar with when it comes to satellite imagery. And I've seen satellite imagery being used for things like where the ice is around the North Pole. Has it shrunk? Is it growing? Maybe weather and weather patterns from outer space. Certainly spy satellites are taking images of other countries to see what's going on. I know that sometimes we'll see a before and after picture in a war of something that existed and then now it doesn't exist anymore. So you see the sand and gravel that's left. These are obviously satellite images. And I'm not that familiar with using satellite imagery for specific, well, as you talk, for macroeconomic forecasting. What kind of stuff are you looking for? Maybe the broader question is, what is the world of satellite imagery? What are the kind of pictures that you're looking at?
Yeah, great questions. And there's a lot of them there. So I'm going to try and unpack it to the best of my ability. And if I miss anything, just tell me and we'll go into it in more detail. But in essence, the imagery comes in the Roy G. Biv scale, which we learned about in physics in high school. But it also comes in a larger band.
Roy G. Biv is all the colors of the rainbow, right?
That's exactly right.
Okay. Good.
So it comes in the spectral invisible light bands, but it also has spectral bands that are invisible to the human eye. Shortwave infrared, near-wave infrared, different levels of spectral readings. And it turns out that you can use a combination of the visible and invisible to track physical footprint built by man, essentially concrete and infrastructure. And it turns out that the expansion of this physical footprint, highways, buildings, construction, is a good proxy for GDP growth because people don't do economic endeavors, economic activity in isolation. They do it in areas of agglomeration. We know that from the World Bank. In fact, some of the research that I did to come up with this idea was a World Bank report on economic geography from 1993 says that about 90% of the world's economic activity comes from 16% of its landmass. And so areas of agglomeration is where economic activity is happening. And if you measure the expansion of these areas of agglomeration, you're picking up expansions in GDP.
So when you talk about roads, I can picture what you're talking about in that if you see a new road going in somewhere, and
Yes.
one of the places that I can imagine is I hear about the forests in the Amazon being raised and roads being put in and economic development happening. So you would see new roads being built there, and then subsequently you would look at those images to see what's happening in those changes over time. Is that the idea?
So I'm so glad you asked that question because it's a great one. And what I would say is it's not that I'm just looking at those individual images. What I'm doing for completeness is that I use the images of the entire United States and the world, all of them, and I apply my algorithm agnostically to all the images that are coming. And it gives me a number, a score of the expansion of the built environment by state for the United States. And then I use that to amalgamate it up for using AI and machine learning to take that numerical data, and it's both in the present and going back to 1984. So I use that numerical data going back to 1984 and the GDP going back to 1984. I use machine learning and AI to make a mathematical bridge that bridges the past satellite imagery to past GDP. And then what happens is, I'm an economist, so I have to do a lot of arm waving, but I'm going to do some physical arm waving. What happens is you've made this bridge between GDP and the satellite imagery, and then GDP comes out with a 3-month lag, at least in this country, and other places comes out with even more of a lag, but the satellites continue in real time. So we use that backward bridge that we built over 50 years of data, and then we combine it with the current images, and that gives us a prediction of where GDP is going to be ahead of the government releases so that you can know what's happening with the business cycle ahead of your competitors.
So you know that when a road is built in Nebraska that used to be rural and is now urbanizing, that GDP is going to follow, that economic development is likely going to follow. Is that the idea?
That is the idea. And it's not just roads, it's infrastructure, it's buildings, it's cities. It's much bigger than just a single road in Topeka. This imagery is over the entire country at the micro level, but amalgamated to the state level and the national level. So it's big. It's not just one road in Topeka. It's all of the roads, all of the construction that is now there, all the factories, all the buildings, all the offices that are there now that weren't there before.
So you can predict what kind of development there may be, residential, industrial. Is that part of the analysis? Is that you can even drill down deeper into the type?
We're not bifurcating between residential and commercial right now, but that is definitely a next step for the algorithm. And it's exciting.
But
There's
you
a
know
lot
where
of,
the development is going to be because you can
that's
see
right.
it happening, and it's happening before others are pulling it all together.
That's
Right.
right.
So wait,
That's
you
right.
used a word before that I haven't heard. Agglomeration. And
Yes.
what is that?
Areas of agglomeration are areas of metropolitan development, a
Hmm.
metropolitan area. It's an area of agglomeration. It's just a bunch of people and buildings and things.
So, and that's where that growth is, or that's where
That's
you're
right.
looking. Yeah. Okay. Got
That's
it.
where most of economic activity occurs. Yep.
Huh. Okay. So you're looking at this, and I've gone down this road, but not quite accurately, saying, okay, you see a road, and there's going to be more economic development. What are the kind of things that you're looking at to predict the economic activity beyond just roads?
The combination of this custom data that we're getting from the satellites in combination with traditional economic data. And the economic data is obviously lagged or not real time, but we use the benefit of both. And this is a great time to mention something that I think is very fascinating, which is, I see your question and I raise you a question, which is, when I use the algorithm and I ingest the satellite data and I ingest the traditional economic data, lagged GDP from last quarter, CPI for inflation, housing starts, housing permits, of the top 10 variables that my AI algorithm uses, how many do you think are from the satellites? Of the top 10 in the algorithm that it's weighting to make these predictions, how many do you think are from the satellites and from traditional economic data, including lagged GDP?
So this is for your
For my
analysis.
algorithm,
Okay.
for my analysis. What
Well,
would you guess?
what would I guess? I would say 7 out of 10.
That's a great guess because that's exactly right.
Really?
7 of the top 10 variables that the algorithm is choosing from come from satellite imagery. So that tells you that satellite imagery, my imagery, is more important for predicting GDP than GDP last quarter, than CPI right now.
Right.
And so that's a strong indicator, that's a strong reflection that we're picking up a real signal. And I know that we are because we've predicted for the last 3 years and 4 quarters live, and we've outperformed the Federal Reserve.
And what's happening with traditional economic reporting, as you said, it lags. What happens is today, the Fed is looking to understand economic activity. It has a team of people that are calling all over the country, calling businesses, finding out if they're growing, if they're receding. If they used to call me when I was at a trade association with electric utilities, and they wanted to know if my members, the electric utilities, were growing or shrinking. And I had eyeballs on that. I wasn't thinking about the Fed, but I was one of those data points that gave them a little windshield into what was happening in this little sector. And of course, it's very clunky, their model. And there's
It's anecdotal. It relies on human observation as opposed to the physical observation, which is what the satellites give. It's an unbiased, unfettered view of what's actually happening, not what we want to happen or what we believe is happening, but what is happening. And the analysis that you're talking about is a very important one from the Federal Reserve. It's called the Beige Book. Each of the Federal Reserve branches, there's 12 of them, 12 Federal Reserve banks, do a Beige Book or do the research and amalgamate that into the Beige Book, which are these anecdotal reports of what's happening around the country in business terms. But my analysis takes that and puts it on steroids and says what's actually happening every time the satellites orbit. And I'll tell you a secret, the satellites orbit every 90 minutes and they have a revisit time of 5 days. Revisit of the same location every 5 days. So you're getting it faster, more accurately, and it's unfettered, it's unbiased. It's a picture of what's actually happening. I mean, a picture is worth 1,000 words.
And your data analysis is updated whenever there's more information that comes through?
So the algorithm's called ROI, Remote Orbital Yield, but that's a joke because I made up the acronym years after I'd already decided the name. It's named after my grandfather, Roy Rewald, who was instrumental in our family and instrumental to me. And so I named it ROI, and I run ROI once a week on Sundays. And that way, it's just no matter how many passes of the satellite there's been and what other data has come in from the traditional economic sources, it's just a line in the sand every Sunday I run it. And we get an apples to apples comparison of ROI this week versus next week versus next week. And that gives you the micro fluctuations of the business cycle. So as opposed to GDP, which is a quarterly statistic, if I run this weekly, I get 13 data points for every one data point that comes out from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the BEA, that puts out GDP. So I can see the micro movements of it. It takes multiple data points to see a trend. And if you get quarterly data, it maybe takes 3 quarters before you see a trend. Are we going up or are we going down? If I gave you 39 data points, we could make a trend much quicker and much more accurately of what's happening. Are we going like this? I'm hand waving, by the way. I'm showing like a upward U, a downward U, or are we just on a bridge going up, on a bridge going down? And that gives you a lot more confidence as a investor, as a trader, as somebody that has responsible for the capital expenditures for a large company to say what's actually happening. You know, are we heading for recession? Should we batten down the hatches, or are good times ahead and make hay while the sun is shining?
Wow. So recognizing how we do it today, sort of traditionally, and constantly reevaluating the past to update the past, because once we've evaluated what's happened in the last 3 months, then the Fed goes back and recalculates what
Provide.
happened 6 months ago, or yeah, the revisions. Okay, so you're getting this information in what's close to real time, and the rest of the country, one might even say the world, is getting this information with a 3 month lag, right?
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
So how does everybody use this? Investors, policymakers,
Yes.
people in Congress, people in state legislatures, even
Yes.
local organizations, local communities, corporations. How do they
Yes.
use this to make better decisions?
Totally. Well, that's the million or billion dollar question, right? And it differs from client to client. We have several. Most of our clients right now are in the investment management field, either as hedge funds or family offices. But I can talk about that. They're investors. They're looking for market timing. So traditionally, market timing has been the much maligned dark arts of economics and financial investing. The great Warren Buffett said, it's not timing the market, it's time in the market, saying don't try to do market timing, just pick good securities, good stocks that have good balance sheets and hold on to them. I hate to tell you, the venerable sage of the Oracle of Omaha
Omaha.
is wrong. I almost said the sage of Adelphi. The Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett is wrong. He was right in his time, but times have changed. Technology has improved. Their market timing is now possible, and I am proving it with my clients. I'm proving it with my own investment management. We have an Atlas Capital that is being invested using market timing signals, and we're up about 60% year to date.
So the reason why is because if you see development happening in a certain area, then would that mean you would invest in economic activity, businesses in that region? Is that the idea?
We're doing it at a much more, excuse the phrase, macro level than that. It turns out there's a really strong correlation between GDP, headline GDP, national GDP, and financial ETFs, the financial market writ large. So a single company has two sources of risk when you invest in it. If I invested in, let's just choose Procter and Gamble, it has two sources of main risk. It has idiosyncratic risk, which is their balance sheet. It's risk that's tantamount to the company itself. And then they have macroeconomic risk. But if you invest in an ETF, which stands for Exchange Traded Fund, it is a basket of multiple underlying equities that have maybe similar profiles or maybe different profiles. But by doing a basket of those ETFs, a basket of those equities in the ETF, you've essentially moved away from one company's idiosyncratic risk, away from their balance sheet risk, and transferred all of the risk to macroeconomic risk. What's happening with the business cycle? Well, it turns out I have a pretty good telescope at the business cycle, so I can use my technology to forecast forward where the economy is going and then triangulate that to where the financial target should be for macro exposed ETFs and trade against it. So one ETF that I really like to trade against is the XLK. And the XLK is the ETF that tracks technology. I believe it's Vanguard. It might be State Street. You'll have to double check me on that. But the XLK is trading right now around, I think, like 276. Let me look it up real quickly. It's trading. My target I know is 272, and it's trading at 278.54 as of close today. And so, according to my analysis, if my analysis says that it should be priced at 272 based on its economic fundamentals of GDP, and it's trading at 278.50, it's overvalued. And that's parallel to what Jerome Powell said in his speech yesterday, saying the markets are over their skis, and I think they're over their skis. And so I think we're primed for a pullback. Now, the former CEO of Citigroup, right before the global financial crisis, said if the music's playing, you got to dance. Well, if the markets are rising, you got to keep dancing. But I think that eventually the song will be up, and they will kind of reverse. And so I've been calling for a market pullback for about 3 weeks now. So that was a lot to unpack. But essentially, the short answer to my very long digression is right now we're doing financial trading for the financial markets. But real estate investors could definitely use this app, and it would be very applicable to them to say that Topeka, Kansas, we keep picking on Topeka, but Topeka is growing fast, so that'd be a good place to buy some property or put down some condos. And I'm just joking about Topeka. I haven't looked at the data recently. I don't know if Topeka is growing very fast or not, but there are real estate implications for this for a lot of states.
So I'm wondering if you are thinking about a place like Topeka, or if you're thinking about all the Topekas across the country. So
Thank you. Yes.
now is a good time to invest in housing generally, as opposed to picking geographic winners and losers. Is the idea that you're looking more broadly at the general trend for pick a sector like housing?
Not necessarily housing. Housing has a lot to do with interest rates. And so if we're not forecasting interest rates, although I do, but my GDP forecast is more applicable to there is more economic growth coming from Topeka or the Topekas of the world. And so you should invest in property or building condos there, not necessarily housing as a sector writ large.
Okay. Nevertheless, you're using data nationwide to make decisions on investments, and you're also looking at some geographical regions
Component for that.
to
Yes.
determine if that's a good place to invest, right?
Yes, although I'm not doing real estate or geographical investments, but it has an applicability for that.
Well, if you were a car maker, so
Yes.
you want to know where the economy is going,
Yes.
and you're selling cars to everybody everywhere, and
Right.
just having an idea of, I mean, you got your own sales data, which is a lot of real time information, but also having a feel for what's happening in the broad economy is going to give you some information about maybe we need to slow down our output at our factories because our data is showing these vehicles selling less, but we're also getting data from Atlas saying that the economy might be slowing, right?
Exactly. Time to batten down the hatches. Yep, exactly. So I love your comment there, Barry. You hit the elephant in the room, which is that this is good for investing, but it's also good for any business, anyone that has any kind of exposure to the business cycle, to the booms and busts of the business cycle, contraction and expansion. And so anybody that has to think about a P&L for their business or capital expenditures for their business would be, P&L being profit and loss statement, would be remiss not to be thinking about where are we heading for the macro economy. And my technology does that and tells you and can give you a leading edge on that.
Wow. You said you have your own investment fund, right?
I do.
Yeah. And is this a fund where you're taking in new investors?
Are you interested? I'm kidding. I'm teasing. I'm having fun here. The money that we are investing on behalf of Atlas right now is my personal money that I use the Atlas signals that I send to my clients and I trade on. But there might be a hedge fund in our future. I can either confirm or deny.
Yeah. Well, if you're doing it with your own money and you're developing a track record, that's what's most important to get investors. So,
Barry, you're speaking my language.
And by putting your own money at risk, I would tend to think that future investors would say that you put your money where your mouth is, as opposed to just wanting to use everyone else's money to test your theory. So that's a smart move on your part. So this satellite data is public. Isn't it available to everyone? Are there other atlases out there?
I am the first and the only as of now, but eventually the word will get out, and that's why we have our patent pending. I filed it in 2021. We're close to getting it over the line, and we're filing a whole bevy of other patents as well.
This is for your algorithm?
Yes. So the algorithm is what's patentable. The imagery is available, but you need to know the secret sauce of how I use the band math and remote sensing and computer vision. And you would need to do it. And you would need to do it in secret, because if I find out about you, and I'm going to use my patent and shut you down.
Yeah. No, I can understand that you've put in years and years of work into this. You've studied it academically and then developed and created it. And it's definitely appears to be unique. I have heard so many lectures. You go to conferences and they have economists, and literally what they do is they have a deck of, it feels like 50 slides. And every month they just add another data point, which was last month or 2 months ago from economic data that's available. And then they try to predict the future based on whatever it is where their last data point came from. And of
It's
course,
an extrapolation. It's an
yeah,
extrapolation,
yeah,
and I don't want to malign my brethren, but I'm not predicting the future. I'm predicting the present using the best telescope that man has ever invented. I'm using actual pictures of Earth, and pictures worth 1,000 words, and I'm using the relationship between those pictures and past GDP to make a mathematical AI relationship that then I can prognosticate the present. I don't say anything about the future. I don't think anyone, no matter how smart you are, could have told us the global financial crisis was coming in 2004. I don't think anyone could have told us COVID was coming in 2017. I think that the best we can do is like a weather forecast. And this is how I analogize it. A weather forecast 10 days out, you have about 50% stock in, pun intended. You believe it about 50%. A day out, you believe it pretty good. If it says it's going to rain, you probably bring an umbrella, especially the day of. That's where economic forecasting is heading.
yeah. Wow. And you appear to be the first.
I appear to
That,
be the first. I invented it and started the patent process. Yep.
yeah.
5 years ago.
What, one more dumb question. Can you tell the level of economic activity by looking, for example, at the historical average of the number of cars in a Walmart parking lot? Is that a measure that you're looking at? I'm trying to picture
Wrap
the
your head
kinds of things
around
that
what
you're
we're
looking
looking
at.
at.
Yeah. Is that
Yeah.
something that's legit?
So that is a very famed story. There was an article in the August 2016 edition of The Economist magazine called The Watchers.
Hmm.
And I remember this article specifically because it was my aha moment. Kind of like Doc Brown slipped on a toilet seat and came up with a flux capacitor. I read this article and I got my flux capacitor moment. And The Economist was reporting that certain hedge funds were using satellite imagery of Walmart parking lots and the number of cars in it to predict Walmart stock. And I thought, why the hell are we just predicting Walmart stock? Why don't we use satellite images to predict the economy? And it turned out it worked pretty good.
Wow. Okay. So when they were doing that, that is legitimate, or at least was, right?
Some people have done it for individual equities, but again, we have idiosyncratic balance sheet risk. And they're only accounting for some of the risk of the balance sheet, let alone the macroeconomic risk. So it didn't factor that well into stock picking.
Well, I can see how when you do it for an entire economy, then you get a lot more data to be able to make those. Well, it's not so much to make predictions. I mean, you might argue that, but at least see what's going on. And then of course
Exactly.
you see trends that are
That's
happening.
right.
Okay. Well, you're building a business.
That's right.
And so you're an entrepreneur as well as developing the technology. It's, I mean, you're building the Jamba Juice store, but you're also making the Jamba Juice, right?
That's right.
Making the
We,
recipes. So
we,
what's that like?
Yeah, so the recipe is already complete for Roy, and that's why we brought it to the patent office. So Roy's done. We're working on other algorithms that I'd rather not go into detail yet, but we have a lot of ideas percolating. And so the answer to your question is I'm wearing a lot of hats. I'm doing sales. I have three priorities that I like to say. It's clients, capital, and code. And so those are my three priorities. For clients, I'm the chief salesman right now. For capital, I'm raising a venture capital round. So if anyone in the venture capital world hears this, is interested in this product, please reach out to me. And then code, we are building multiple other algorithms for multiple other countries, for multiple other applications. And excuse the phrase, but the sky's the limit.
Yeah, I can see. Wow, that's fascinating. So you're going 90 miles an hour.
On the highway, hopefully with my seatbelt on.
Yeah, yeah. And every conversation is an opportunity to try to move the ball forward down the field. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's both tough and extremely exciting.
I'm having a ball. As long as you're talking about moving the ball down the field, let's just tell you I'm having a ball. I'm not afraid of hard work, not afraid to roll up my sleeves. I feel like I'm in alignment. of who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I'm delighted to have this opportunity to do this. I'm working with great people. I have an employee. I have 2 advisors, one a technical advisor, one a business advisor. Some of my best friends believed in me and they invested in me. And so I have my investors. And I love our clients. So I'm just having a ball. I really enjoy what I'm doing. And no matter how stressful it gets or how many, use another ball metaphor, how many balls are in the air, I'm just delighted that I get to do this. And so I hope that we get to keep doing it and do it well.
So what else can you measure besides GDP?
Pass. I have ideas, but I'm not.
That's the other stuff that you're working on?
That's right.
Okay. And then maybe one day there might be an opportunity to invest in the Atlas investment fund.
That's right. We're going to call it Atlas.
Well, if you're going to do that, would you do it with just hedge funds, or would you make it available to the unwashed masses?
Whoever would like GDP data, come talk to Atlas Analytics. And if you are interested in Atlas Capital, come talk to us about that.
That sounds good. And then what does the technology mean for economic transparency in the future? If this data, well, I shouldn't say if, because this data is available in real time and you've cracked that nut, eventually others may say, well, let me figure it out myself on my own. Let's assume that they're not borrowing your patent. Then, others will make an attempt to do it. So that's using the transparency of satellite data and so on. Is there going to be more of this?
The short answer to your question, and it's a phenomenal one, is yes. The slightly longer answer is Atlas Analytics and my technology have opened up a whole new avenue of economic inquiry into the way the world works. I believe that we have uncovered a truth of the economic world that you can measure the business activity from pictures from space. And I think I would invite, instead of be challenged by others, I would invite others to pick up the mantle and use remote sensing and computer vision and satellite imagery and your creativity to invent to the next great thing. And let's do it together. And if you're interested in working with us, that'd be delightful. Come reach out to me at Atlas Analytics. And if you have your own ideas, I wish you the best. And I hope it doesn't compete with me. But if it does, every Coke needs a Pepsi.
So let's say I'm a mid-level manager at a software company and I'm supplying software to a variety of clients, maybe helping them with their cash registers or their inventory or whatever it might be. But I'm giving my clients a platform to make their businesses more efficient. And that's just my job. How does this impact me? Why do I need to pay attention to what's going on at Atlas?
Well, whether you pay attention to the weather or not, it will rain on you. And so if you want to carry an umbrella on rainy days, it's important to you. Tongue-in-cheek, glib jokes aside, That mid-level manager probably has a 401k, probably has student loans, probably is a mortgage, probably wants to put their kid to school someday. And so this can help them to know what to do with their financial investments and to do with, is it a good time to be looking for a job? Maybe I'm not happy at my software company. Is it a good time to be looking at for another job? Or should I really hunker down and just do the best job that I can because the stormeth cometh and jobs might not be as plentiful. And so that's why they should care about it.
Sure, because they'll get information about the general economy, which ultimately affects them at some level. Now, You are providing this information to subscribers. You have a Substack, right? Or how can I get some info? Yeah, hey.
Yeah, please.
How can I get some info here?
Yeah.
Without paying.
Or
is there a paid version? Tell me.
Lies the rub. We have different levels. So we have the Substack for free, and I put out my GDP forecast quarterly for what the number is going to be ahead of the actual release from the BEA. Mm-hmm. The next one will be coming out in October. I shoot those on YouTube and I put them on my Substack. My Substack is www.atlasanalytics.info. We have a paid version if you want financial data, not updated weekly, but as I write articles about what's happening with finance and how you can trade it, I put that on the premium. And so I actually write an article every week. Some are paid, some are free, but I'm putting out an article every week, and a lot of them have implications on how you can make money.
What's the
So if you're
fee for
interested
your
in that,
Substack?
it's $500 a year.
Okay. I imagine the subscription for the entire service for General Motors might be a little more expensive.
It is.
Yeah.
It's in the 5 and 6 figures.
Okay. So for a company, they're going to want to drill down into the data, and you'll be working with them on that. Got it.
And we have a white glove consulting service that we do on top of that if you want something built to spec. So I potentially have another client that's interested in a certain thing, and so I might build a spec something for them, and then that is a white glove service on top of it.
Got it. So you've got a Substack that has a free element and then a paid element, and
That's right.
a YouTube channel, same kind of thing?
YouTube's free. If I get some more followers, maybe I'll start putting ads on it or something, and I'll make some money that way.
Got it.
Kidding. I mean, I'm not, but yeah. YouTube is free. You can find me on YouTube. That Atlas Analytics on YouTube. I don't know what the actual URL is, but you can find us. And we have a website, atlasanalytics.com. And yeah, check us out. I'd be delighted to chat with anyone that's interested. And I hope this was helpful.
I'll get the URLs and put them in the show notes.
Please.
Absolutely. Well, Jake, this has been fascinating. And it's sort of like blowing my mind. And I'm delighted to hear the details after hearing what you're doing in terms of macroeconomics from outer space, which sounds a little, alien-like, but more than anything, it's highly, highly analytical, and you're using really valuable data. So kudos to you and Atlas. And I look forward to watching Atlas grow, and I'm going to start subscribing.
I appreciate that. Well, the pleasure's been all mine, Barry. I was delighted that we got connected. I'm delighted to chat with you. And next time you're in Boston, I'd be delighted to buy you a beer.
That's wicked smart.
Wicked smart. All right, buddy.
Thanks, Jake.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks to Jake Schneider for being our guest today. And thank you for listening. If you want to get in touch, send me an email at barry@barrymoline.com. And check out my podcast for up-and-coming leaders, the Leadership Career Accelerator.